Welcome to the Clear Brand Academy podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. I'm your host, Alexander Toth. Today, we're continuing our conversation about the Clear Brand Marketing Flywheel. So a quick recap of what the flywheel is and what we've talked about the last couple of weeks. So picture a triangle, and in the center is your website. And this flywheel is going to rotate around your website. All of the pieces of the flywheel are going to feed back into or out of your website. So that's the core. Then, if you picture this triangle along the right side, the line is actually an arrow. And with that arrow, we have increased traffic. Then down across the bottom is another arrow, and that is generate leads. And then coming back up the other side is another arrow, and that is get sales. So what we want to do is rotate this flywheel. We want to engage in all these activities, and in doing so, we're able to build momentum. So a couple weeks ago, we went through in detail what the flywheel is. I'm not going to go through that again here. And then last week, we talked about your website and how to write a website that sells. So today, we're going to move on to this first side, this first arrow, increasing traffic. Now, there's two main ways to increase traffic to your website. One is by buying that traffic. We're going to call that ads. And the second is by generating traffic organically. Now, because these are very different, today we're going to focus in on the organic side of it. And then next week, we're going to jump into ads. And I'm going to be interviewing our ads specialist so you can hear some specifics on how to set up ads. That's going to be a great one that we're going to talk through next week. But today we're going to focus on organic. So the main idea with organic traffic is that people find you. With ads, you're buying the traffic. You're basically going to them and then bringing them to you. And that's why ads are so expensive, is because Facebook and Google and all of this help you find those people. But organic, they're finding you. Now, when we talk about organic traffic, what we're mostly talking about is Google. Google dominates the search engine market share. Of all of the searches that happen on the internet, 92% of them are done on Google. And the majority of what we're going to talk about today is going to apply to the others, but in my opinion, because all of the other search engines combined only make up 8% of the search market share, to me, it's not there's not a huge benefit. There's diminishing return in trying to optimize your website for each of these specifically. But if we do a good job optimizing it for Google and just showing up on Google, you're probably going to be showing up on these other search engines as well. So we're going to focus in on Google. Now, the main idea here is people are finding you. So how are they finding you? Well, they're searching. They're typing in some kind of a search question or query, and then Google or these other search engines are populating the page with websites, blog articles, pages that they think will help the searcher accomplish their goal. So the first basic foundational principle that I want to lay down here is this. A lot of marketers go into things like keywords or, the trending tactic of 2022 or whatever it is. But all of those trending tactics are going to change. Google's main purpose is to help a searcher find what they're looking for. That doesn't change. So if you're following these marketers who are telling you about the main SEO trend for right now, that's going to change. I don't think that is a sustainable SEO strategy. And SEO stands for search engine optimization. So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about organic traffic in Google. We're optimizing for search engines. So going with what that main trend is right now is just not a sustainable strategy. There are little things that we're going to talk about today that tend to have some staying power because they are helping Google provide searchers with what they're looking for. So that's what we want to keep in mind here. Google's job is to provide searchers with what they're looking for, and everything that ranks on the first page of Google is there because Google thinks it will help. It will help them find what they're looking for. So if we keep that in mind, there are some tactics that aren't really going to change. Because Google, over the years, let's talk about keywords for a second. Keywords have been a hot topic. And a lot of marketers did what's called keyword stuffing. So the idea here is somebody types in a search question. Let's say that they're looking for SEO, right? They're looking for SEO tips. So they type SEO tips into Google. Then what used to happen is the page that said SEO tips most is the one that ranked highest. And so it was a common tactic to just fill your entire blog article or web page with the term SEO tips. And this is called keyword stuffing. Now, because Google is trying to help searchers find what they're looking for, they identified pretty early on that the pages that have SEO tips in there most aren't necessarily the most helpful. So Google has moved away from keywords. So if you're working with a marketer or talking to a marketer who's still going on and on about how many times this keyword is in your article, they're 10 years behind. Google has been updating their software, their AI. It's getting smarter and smarter and smarter because they want to help searchers find what they're looking for. And so just counting the number of times that the keyword is in the page doesn't equal how helpful that article is. So Google is getting better at identifying how helpful the article is. So I'm going to go through some ways that we can help Google understand that your article is or your web page is helpful. But we have to keep this foundational principle in mind because the tactics are going to change. Google's developing smarter and smarter AI that can understand synonyms and that can understand complete content. And we're going to get into these things. And so if all we're doing is chasing the tactic of right now, we're missing it, right? In a year, we're going to have to go through and redo all of our blog articles. So our main principle is if Google's job is to help searchers find what they're looking for, how do we provide searchers with what they're looking for? Because if we align ourselves with that purpose, we're going to find that our articles have a lot greater staying power, and there's a way higher chance that they're going to continue ranking. We're not going to have to go back through and change everything in them because we wrote a great article to start with. So before I tell you how we're going to write these articles, we want to track. We want to track your search ranking, your traffic, so that we can see the progress. We want to measure what matters here. So if you start making these changes to your site and writing blog articles, following some of the principles that I'm about to share, and you're not tracking, you're going to end up feeling like it's not working. When we're lacking information, our brains like to fill in those gaps with worst case scenarios and with negative. So what we want to do is start tracking before we start writing. That way, once we're writing and we're making these changes, we're able to see, oh yeah, my search ranking increased by 2 positions in the last week. Maybe your search ranking for that particular article is number 45 and you went up to 43. Well, that's a measurable improvement, but if you're not tracking it, you're not going to notice a change like that. So we want to make sure that we're tracking. So how do you track? There's a few tools that we use and recommend. So first off, we want to be using Google Search Console. Because we're focusing in on Google, we are going to be using some of Google's tools here. So Google Search Console is a free tool from Google. It is different from Google Analytics. When we take on client websites, what we find often is that they have a Google Analytics account, but they don't have a Google Search Console account. Now, Google Search Console is specific to Google Search. Google Analytics covers a lot more stuff. So we want to set up both, but we're going to start with the Google Search Console, make sure that this is set up. And this is going to tell you your search statistics. So it'll tell you what page you're ranking on for a number of search terms. And it's going to tell you how many times your search terms are being searched for, and then what percentage of those are you being clicked, if any. So this is a great place to start. Now, it doesn't do a great job at tracking historical data, which is why we're going to complement that with some other tools I'll tell you about in a second. Next, we're going to have Google Analytics. Now, Google Analytics is going to tell us traffic. It's going to tell us demographics, all sorts of information. And it integrates with Google Search Console. So we can actually then see this is the traffic, this is where the traffic is coming from, these are the search terms that you're showing up for, and we can look at that within Google Analytics. Now, the tool Google Analytics is going through some major updates. So if you don't fully understand this stuff, I would recommend working with a developer. For example, with Google Analytics, they're actually sunsetting, so they're getting rid of, sunsetting is just a nice way to say that, but they're getting rid of their current version of Google Analytics and they're transitioning to a newer, better version. So while Google's purpose doesn't change, sometimes their tools do. So if you don't fully understand how to insert code into your website, I would work with a developer on this. The next tool is you've got it. There's a number of tools out there that are going to give you much more insightful data. So the biggest two are SEMrush and Ahrefs. That's Ahrefs. Both of these very comparable tools have a lot of ways that you can visualize your data. They will also track where are you ranking, where are these specific pages ranking, where are you ranking for certain search terms, and then you can see the growth and the change over time. They have a ton of tools within there. So I'm not going to go into all of those here, but you can also do things like looking up key ideas, search terms that you might want to target when you're writing your next article. So SEMrush and Ahrefs are the two that typically come most highly recommended. At ClearBrand, we use SEMrush primarily. HubSpot is another big tool that we use, and they have an SEO tool within HubSpot. It's not as robust, but it does have some of the basic things that you might want in your tracking and analytics. So you can look into those and see which one you might work with best. And that's going to depend on how advanced are your development skills, and are you working with a developer and maybe they can get into these tools, or do you just like to learn new things and maybe you're going to want to jump in and learn one of these tools. So now we're going to insert this code into your site. We're going to start tracking where you're at now, so that once you start making the changes I'm about to share, you can see the changes and the growth and what's working and what's not. At ClearBrand, we measure and track everything we possibly can because it provides us with data. And data allows us to make better decisions. I don't want to discount opinions and emotions. I think that those can play into decisions as data points. But really, if my opinion is that this blog article is the best article on our site and it's bringing in the most traffic, but the data shows that it's not, we need that data so that we can make adjustments and move forward with informed decision making. So that's why we want to collect as much data as we possibly can here. All right, now let's jump into what do we actually do? How do we rank on Google? And then how do we increase that search ranking? So really, we want to be showing up on the first page, ideally. But even better than that is showing up first, maybe second or third for search terms. So if you're not on the first page, the first question is, how do you get to the first page? Once you're on the first page, then we're going to be asking, how do you get to be that number one search result on Google? So when we're talking about organic traffic, we're talking about Google, what we have to do is focus in on content. So SEO is part of content marketing. Now, content marketing is a broader term. I haven't used it thus far, because not a lot of folks who are outside of marketing use that term a lot. But content marketing is what we're going to be doing to increase our search ranking. So if we're talking about search engine optimization, we're really linked together. That's one thing with content marketing. It's basically one thing. The SEO is going to be elements within that. And I'll get to specifically how do we optimize your pages for search engines. But content marketing is kind of this umbrella term that's going to allow us to show up on Google and then increase that search ranking as well. So we have to be creating content. Now, content on your pages, on your website, is both your web pages and your blog articles. Anything that Google is looking at, I would consider content. So while blogging is a massive part of content marketing and a massive part of ranking on Google, we also want to be considering the web pages that you have, your homepage, your sales pages, your landing pages. All of that can be optimized for Google as well. So the principles I'm about to share apply to both of these. And when we take on a client and we start revamping their website and laying the groundwork for the Clear Brand Marketing Flywheel, we are looking at both. We're writing homepage, sales pages, landing pages. And we're going to be doing what I'm about to share on those pages. And then we move into the flywheel, the phase where we're blogging. And we're doing a number of things to increase traffic, including ads and things. And we're also going to be using the principles I'm about to share on those blog articles and additional landing pages and things like that. So there's 3 primary steps that we're going to go through as we are creating this content. The first step is that the content needs to be incredible. If we go back to Google's purpose, which is helping searchers find what they're looking for. If we want to show up on Google, our articles need to be what people are looking for. So if somebody is searching for, like I just said, SEO tips, this article needs to be just incredible. It needs to be the article that people are bookmarking so that they can go back to it. They're sharing it with their friends. And in order to do that, it has to be amazing. So first, we'll identify what are people actually searching for. If I'm just writing for self-expression, if I'm writing because I want to have my own thoughts and opinions out there in the world, that's fine, but that's not SEO and that's not content marketing. So we've got to separate those out. If you are trying to increase traffic to your website, we are not writing for self-expression. We are not writing so that you feel good about yourself. We are specifically writing so that people find you. So then we need to be asking, what are people searching for? These key ideas, and we can still use the term keywords, but we're not going to go overboard with filling the entire article with as many keywords as we possibly can, but we can use that. So we can look up on Google or on other tools like SEMrush, what are people searching for? Type in something that we might search for if we were looking for a product or service that your company sells. What are some of those search terms? And then Google Keyword Tool or SEMrush will display, they'll show you how many people are searching for that. They'll also show you synonyms people are searching for. And so what you're going to want to do is, depending on the size of your company, if you're smaller, you're going to be looking for these keywords and these search terms that have a good amount of traffic, but also have low competition. Now, the reason is if you're just getting started, your website doesn't have a lot of authority with Google yet. So you're not going to be able to rank for something with high competition because other websites that have more authority with Google are going to be more trusted and they will be already ranking higher, and you just can't compete yet. Now, if you're an established business and you do have good authority, so we're going to be able to see that in SEMrush, it'll show you your domain authority score on a scale of 0 to 100. If you have good authority, 50, 70, 80, 90, yes, you're going to be able to jump into a search term with higher competitiveness and have a chance at ranking for that. But if your authority score is low, you're not going to be able to rank for that yet. So we're going to step into this content marketing and blogging by focusing on search terms that have some amount of searches happening. And that's really going to depend when you're typing in your search terms and you're doing this research. That's going to depend on the other synonyms, the other search terms that you're looking at. So if one search has 1,000 searches per month and has a high competitiveness, but another term has 100 searches per month and a low competitiveness, you might need to settle for that lower searched term for now while we're building your domain authority. If you have the higher domain authority, go for the one that has the highest searches happening per month. So this is a give and take here. So as we press on and move forward in our SEO strategy, our content marketing strategy, you're going to be able to slowly target search terms that have more searches happening and higher competitiveness. Now, if you happen to be in an industry where you find a search term with low competitiveness and high searches, go for that. That's going to be great. This is how we started with ClearBrand when I became a StoryBrand certified guide. Back then, I was one of the first StoryBrand certified guides. And there weren't a lot of other StoryBrand guides who understood SEO. There's still not a lot. If you're looking at, I think that there's 800 StoryBrand guides at this point. There's a small fraction of them that actually know what they're doing when it comes to marketing and SEO and content marketing and stuff. So for us, we targeted the term StoryBrand because we knew that those people had high intent, they're very specific in what they're looking for, and there was low competitiveness. So we were able to rank for those search terms very quickly. That increased our domain authority and allowed us, as the StoryBrand searches increased and as the competition increased, we were able to stay ahead of many of the other people who were optimizing their pages and blogs for StoryBrand. So if you can find a keyword like that where you're able to identify something that people searching for this will want what you're selling, because we want to keep in mind here that blogging is not only about traffic. We're increasing traffic so that people buy your product. If you're increasing traffic, but the people who are coming to your website have no interest in what you're selling, you're not going to end up making money. So that's not the purpose here. So we're increasing traffic, and we're doing that with search terms that we've identified people who are searching for that term will likely want what you're selling. So we did that with StoryBrand. I think that's a fantastic example here. And then whatever it is that you're selling, we're going to be identifying these searches that you can rank for. Now, this is why we want to focus on web pages and blogs, and not only blogs like some marketing agencies do, is because your product page or your service page might be able to rank for this stuff. So we've got a StoryBrand web design page and StoryBrand agency. And when we have these out there, that's a much higher intent than somebody Googling StoryBrand. If they only Google StoryBrand, they might just be looking for the company StoryBrand. They might want to go to the workshop. But if they Google StoryBrand agency or StoryBrand website, now that's a keyword that has much higher intent. Those folks might be interested in becoming a client of ours. So those are the ones that we're going to focus in on. So you're going to use those same principles when you're identifying what people are searching for. Now, once you've found what people are searching for, go to Google and search for it. And then you're going to look at what else is ranking on the first page, because that's who you're competing with, right? Because we want to get you onto the first page with this web page or this blog article. So if we are going with the SEO tools example that I gave, now, if somebody types in SEO tools, they're probably looking for a tool. So a blog article probably is not going to rank on the first page. Now, we're going to confirm this by going to that first page and seeing what's there. So if the page is full of actual tools and you don't have a tool, let's find a different search term. So maybe something like best SEO tools or SEO tools comparison. Now, those might have more blog articles, and if that's what you're about to write, that's going to give us some insight into this particular search term. So when we go to Google and we type this search term in, we're looking at what's there. We're confirming, am I going to be able to compete with this stuff? And can I create something that's better than everything else on the first page? The reason why I want to create something that's better is because Google's job is to help searchers find what they're looking for. So if that first page has incredible articles, that's what people are looking for. If you can't create something that's better, then you're clearly not going to be what people are looking for. And your article is not going to be what people are looking for. So we have to be able to create something that's better than everything else on that first page if we want a chance at ranking number one or even on that first page. So this is that next step. Now, if you can't compete, if you can't create an article that's better than all the other articles on the first page, let's find a different search term. So like I said with SEO tools, maybe you're not going to create a tool. So we're going to find another search term that has articles, best SEO tools compared, something like that. Then we're going to go back. We're going to double check that has a decent amount of searches and traffic, and that it doesn't have a competitiveness that is outside of what you're going to be able to compete with. So now we've confirmed, okay, this is the search that we're going to target here. So now you got to go write it. We're going to go through principles on how to write, but the basic idea is yours has to be the best. It has to be solving the problem that the searchers have. It has to be what people are searching for. So don't forget that. Now, part of making yours the best is going to be having complete content. So what this means is if we're creating an article on SEO, it's probably not going to be enough for me to end right here and say, you've got to create stuff that's the best and that's it. What we're going to want to do is go through how, what does that look like? Let's get specific. Why, things like that. How do we make this absolutely complete content? So if we're writing a review of a movie, let's say Avatar, the one with the blue people, not the cartoon, and we're talking about Avatar, and we're trying to rank for maybe reviews of Avatar in 2022 or something like that. We're going to need to talk about Jake Sully. We're going to need to talk about Neytiri and Grace. And Google, this is where we want to really focus in on what searchers are after here rather than the tactics of the day, is because 10 years ago, Google didn't understand what complete content is. Google was just looking for the term avatar, but now Google does understand. And so if you're trying to target something like avatar, Google will be looking for terms like Jake Sully and like unobtainium and Neytiri. And it will be using those other terms to confirm that this actually is a useful piece of content about the movie Avatar. So you're going to want to go through and create absolute complete content and know that Google's smart enough to figure it out these days. That's why we're just basically, we're focusing all of our efforts on creating content that searchers want. And everything else is secondary. How many times does a keyword go into the page? That is far secondary for us to just creating something that searchers are after. Now, complete content is part of that. if somebody is looking for the best SEO tools and we create an article that compares two of them, that is clearly not going to be as useful as an article that compares 15 of them. So go look at the page, find out what's there, make yours the best, and make it absolutely complete. Now, the next step, I said that there's 3 steps to this. So the first is creating incredible content. The second is writing for humans. Now, this is where a lot of marketers go wrong. They create articles that are specifically written for Google. Well, guess what? That's not going to be helpful for a human. So we want to keep the human in mind because Google is consistently getting smarter. Google is getting better at providing the searchers what they're after. So if we focus in on humans rather than the search engines as our first priority, this doesn't have to be an either or. We're going to do a both and here, but our first priority is writing for humans. That means we're creating something that will have long-term search possibilities here. If this is absolutely helpful for humans, Google will get better and better and has gotten better and better at figuring out how to serve that up to the people who are looking for it. So don't start your article with Google in mind. Start your article with the human in mind. Write out this incredible article. Now, we're going to jump to step 3, and we're going to talk about OnPage SEO. This is what we're going to do for Google, and there's specific ways to do it for Google, but this is also helpful for humans. So let's go in and I'll walk through how it's helpful for both. The main principle behind OnPage SEO is this is really just the structure of the page. So if you think about reading a book, it would not be helpful to you if you picked up a book that does not have a title and you open it up and all it is the same size font on every single page, no paragraphs, no structure. It's just endless content. That does not help you understand the book. And the same is true of your article. So we're really going to be structuring your article in the same way that a book is structured. The reason is books are really there to help people understand what the book is about, right? Provide this information, and your article is going to be the same. And the way that books are broken up is very intentional to help you internalize, remember, enjoy the book. So the first thing we're going to do on your article is we're going to give it a title. Now that title is going to include the search term that we identified in the title. It's best to have it early in the title, but we definitely want it somewhere in the title. If somebody types in best SEO tools and they see a result on Google that says best SEO tools, they're very likely to click on it because it seems to them that this is going to help them get what they want. Now, you can have some other words around that, 15 best SEO tools compared in 2022, for example, and that's a good idea to do. Titles that have the search term in it and numbers or questions or dates tend to perform better than titles that only have the search term. So including something like a number or a question, what are the best SEO tools? 15 compared, right? That's going to get you more clicks than just something that says best SEO tools. Now, there are some other tactics with the title, but some of this is where there's research that's coming out all the time, and that kind of shifts a little bit. So this might be something where you're going to be keeping up with what goes into the title in order to rank best. So for now, we're going to look for including the search term and then 1 or 2 of either numbers, dates, questions. We want to keep humans in mind, first of all. So we're not just going to include number, date, and question because we think it's going to make Google rank us higher. Google will rank us higher if it gets clicked. And in order for it to get clicked, the human has to click it. The human has to see, oh, this looks helpful. I'll click on that. So it can't just be gibberish. It cannot be nonsensical. We want it to make sense. But in general, numbers, questions, and dates tend to perform better than titles without them. So when we're creating this article, depending on what platform you're using, typically when you put the title into the spot on your website builder that says title, it will automatically give it the tag title. Now that tag, the title tag is what it's called, that is what Google is going to pull, and that is what they're going to display in the search results as that main blue clickable link. So that's the title tag. So whatever you put in that title slot is going to show up as the title. So we're writing the title for humans, and then we're going to make sure that we've put the title in the right spot in your website builder so that it has the title tag, and Google is going to pull from that. Right? This is how the human and Google are similar but a little bit different. The human doesn't care. They're not looking at the code itself, but Google is. So we want it to have a good title for the human and then to be tagged appropriately for Google. Now we also want to avoid embellishing in the titles. If you write something that's just over the top, you actually will see a lower search ranking because people, not Google, but people think it's clickbait. And so we want to avoid that embellishing. We want to say something that is clear, that is accurate, and that is not over the top. If we go over the top, they're going to assume it's clickbait and they're going to move on. This is where some of these tactics have shifted because 10, 20 years ago, when the internet was new and we're all figuring out how to use it, sure, we might have clicked on that really fantastical title. But then we realized, oh, this is just clickbait, and we've been trained, right? So this isn't necessarily a Google thing. This is a human thing based on all of those marketers who are trying to game the system. So part of what Google's really doing, spending a lot of time working on right now is how do we prevent marketers from gaming the system? Well, this is an area where the humans are actually preventing that because they're not clicking it, and stuff that doesn't get clicked goes down in search rankings. All right, the next part of on-page SEO. So I said that there's three main things, right? We've got create incredible content, write for humans, and then on-page SEO. There's really about 10 parts of on-page SEO. So we're going on to the second part of on-page SEO. And again, this is how we're structuring it for Google. We want to write this incredible stuff, and then we're structuring it in a way that Google understands so that it knows which searches to display this article for. So the second thing here is the meta description. Now, Google and your website, depending on which platform you're on, will automatically generate a meta description for you if you don't create one. But we do want to put one in there because if you intentionally write a meta description, it's going to rank higher, tends to rank higher. Now, what is a meta description? The meta description, when you pull up when you search for something on Google, you're going to see three main parts of the search results. The first is the title. That's what we just talked about. The second part is the link, and you're going to want to have, we'll talk about links in a second. The third part is that it's a short paragraph, about 2 lines. That's the meta description. So this does not necessarily show up in your article. This is going to be in the back end of your website somewhere, depending on which platform you're using. We use WordPress at ClearBrand, and we use a plugin called Yoast. And so we're able to jump down into the Yoast part of the blog article page in the back end of the website, and we're going to put our meta description in there. But if you're on Squarespace or somewhere else, this might be in a different location. So you're just going to want to find where the meta description is. Then we want to write a meta description that it's very brief, just a few sentences. It includes the search term, and it really tells the searcher what the article is about. So again, this doesn't necessarily show up inside of the blog article itself. This is specifically for Google. So it should be a clear, concise summary of the article. So if we're targeting the search term best SEO tools, the meta description might say something like, these are the 15 best SEO tools ranked and reviewed with our top 3 suggestions so that you can make a simple decision, right? Something like that. It's going to tell them what the article is about or the web page, and really why they should click on yours instead of the competition's. So brief, clear. Those are the main principles with meta description. Now, if you're using the Yoast SEO plugin, it actually gives you a suggested length, and so you can keep typing or delete so that the Yoast SEO plugin displays a green light saying, "Hey, that's a good length." If you're on another tool, like another website builder like Squarespace or something, it might have other tools there. There's too many for us to get into here, so I'll just mention that one. Now, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to move into your article itself. And going back to the example of a book, the meta description might be equivalent to the little description that's on the back of the book. Then we're going to open up the book, and what are we going to see? Well, we're going to see the title of the book is going to be on one of those internal pages. And then we turn the page, and there's a table of contents, and we turn the page, and there's a chapter heading. Okay? We're going to use these same basic principles with your article. So the title, most blogging platforms will automatically put the title onto your site with the appropriate tag, which is going to be an H1 tag. Now, if this is a web page and you're using something like WordPress, you're going to need to manually add that tag. So we build with Divi. Divi is a fantastic builder for websites. And we build with Divi because our clients like to be able to go in and make changes if they want to, add pages if they want to, and Divi just makes it really easy. So if you're going to use a tool like Divi, or even something like Squarespace has this built in as well, you'll write out that header for the page, and then you'll highlight it, and it'll let you select, just like on Google Docs. It'll let you select, is this a heading 1, or is this a heading 2, or a heading 3, and on, or a paragraph, or whatever else. On an article or a web page, you only want to have one heading 1. That is like the title of your book. If you have multiple heading 1s, it's like giving somebody a book and there's 4 titles there. They don't even know what the title is. So that's confusing for Google. How is Google supposed to know what this article is about if there's 4 titles and they're all conflicting? So we want to have one H1 tag. So you'll go in, and if it's a web page, you'll highlight it, you'll select heading 1. If it's a blog article, most blogging platforms, if they're worth their salt, they will automatically do this with the title that we've already put in there. So you wouldn't have to worry about that on a blog. So the H1 tag is going to be the same as your title in most instances. The rest of this article, we're organizing it very intentionally, just like a book. So after you have that, you'll probably have some paragraph text. Then you'll have another section, and that's going to have a heading 2 tag. So if we think about the heading 1 tag being equivalent to the title of a book, the heading 2 tag is equivalent to the chapter, the chapter heading. That's a heading 2 tag. Now, depending on the length of the section, you might have a heading 3 tag below that. You might have bold text below that. So just like in a book, we're going to have this, essentially it's an outline structure. We're going to have that same structure within your article. So you're going to have one heading 1 tag because that's equivalent to the title. But then you can have as many heading 2 tags as you want, just like in a book. The number of chapters depends on the length of the book. It doesn't matter. You can have 50, you can have 3. I'm reading The Effective Executive right now, and there's 7, right? That's not a lot. There's not a lot of chapters in there. I've also read quite a few books by Brandon Sanderson. Now, he writes like 1,500-page books. So there's like 50 chapters. It doesn't matter. We just want them to be tagged accurately. So your sections will have that heading 2 tag. If you have a subsection, just like in a chapter, right? You might have a chapter of a book that then has 3 subsections. That's going to be your heading 3. And on. And that can go heading 4, heading 5, however you want to do that. But we want this. This is where we're going to be including both humans and Google in our thought processes. This type of organization makes it easier for humans to understand, right? If you open up a book and it has a title on it, and then there's no chapters, it's just a bunch of words, that's just overwhelming. Same thing on your article. So we're going to break up your content and we're going to put it in sections that make sense. This is going to make it easier for humans to understand it. And then on the Google side, we'll just make sure that we've highlighted the text and then we've selected the appropriate heading. That gives it the tag within the code so that Google understands the outline and the makeup of the article. So this is a both and, humans and Google thing. So all of your headers are covered by this. Bold text is the same. Now, Google is going to preference and prioritize the headings and the bold text in the same way that humans do. So bold text is more important than paragraph text. We've bolded it for a reason. Heading text, heading 1 text is the most important. Heading 2 text is the second most. Heading 3 is the third most, right? So as we break this up in a way that makes sense for humans, it's also helping Google understand it. Now, we do want to include your search term in some of definitely the H1, that heading 1 text, in some of the H2, not all of it, because that wouldn't be helpful for humans. But some of the heading 2 text should have your search terms, or if we're talking about something like avatar again, you might have a section for each of the main characters. That's also really helpful for humans and for Google to see a section with who is Jake Sully, who is Neytiri, things like that. Now, that's where really targeting the humans and then having Google in mind helps here, right? That's going to help both sides of this understand your article. So now that we have this really clear structure, let's talk about links. Now, linking is a big deal when it comes to the authority of web pages and blog articles. Google sees a link as like a thumbs up, right? So imagine you go meet somebody new. You don't know anything about them. You don't know if you should trust them or not. You don't know where they fit into the grand scheme of your life. But instead, if we say that that person was introduced to you by a close friend, now you might trust them a little bit more. Now, what if that person was introduced to you by a close friend, and then 5 of your other friends said, "Oh yeah, I know that person. They're great. I really like that person." Well, suddenly you're trusting that person more and more with each other person who you already know that tells you that they like that person. This is how links function within the world of Google. Every time you get a link from somewhere else to this article, that's like a friend of Google's who Google already trusts saying, "Hey, this article is trustworthy." So this is a major factor in how we're going to increase your domain authority, which is what I mentioned earlier. So the more links that you have linking to your website from sites that Google already trusts, Google is going to trust you more. Now, in the same way that if a person who you don't like tells you that they do like someone else, you're probably not going to increase your trust for that person. This is where the link comes from matters. So let's talk about the places you can get links. The first and easiest place is from other pages on your website. So what we want to do is look at which pages on your site have the highest authority in Google's mind. And you can do this with a tool like SEMrush. It has some domain authority and some link tools in there that you can use. So you're going to take the highest authority pages on your site, and you're going to put links on those pages to lower authority pages on your site. Or, even to high authority pages, that's fine. But if you're taking a high authority page and you're putting a link on there to a lower authority page, that's going to help increase the authority of that lower authority page. So that's how we can use your own website, your own articles to increase the authority of other pages. So that's what's called internal links. And every article should be linking to another page on your site. That's just a link that you have control over. It's a huge oversight not to take advantage of this. Now, there's another place you can get links from, which is other people's websites. These are called, this is called link building. And let me go to how you can get those links here in a minute. But on your article, you're going to want to link out to other people's websites as well. And this also shows Google that you're trustworthy and that you're kind of helping the internet out. So we're going to put one external link. So one link on your article that goes somewhere that's not your website, and it goes to a trustworthy web page. Another article, right? Google sees that and says, oh, this article is more trustworthy because they're linking to another article that's also trustworthy. That's like a reference, right? It's like if you have a medical book and it doesn't have any references, I'm not going to trust that medical book. But if it does have references to studies and to things that other doctors have said, I'm going to trust that medical book more, right? That's kind of the principle here. So if you are talking about SEMrush, for example, it would be a great idea to link to SEMrush. And Google says, there's a nice reference. That's a trustworthy article there. So that's something else that you have control over, is linking out to other sites. So I mentioned link building. Now, that's not something that you do on your article. So let me hold off on that for a second. Let's finish the work on your article, and then we'll talk about what link building is. How do you get links to your site? So the next thing we're going to do on your article, you want to have some images. Now, placement matters. If you have a big image up at the top, what that does is it prevents your searcher from getting what they want fast. So a big image up at the top is not great, because it means the searcher's after something and now they can't see it immediately. They've got to scroll past this big image. So we do want images on your site, but we want to place them throughout the article ideally. A lot of websites will have an image up at the top, but they'll have text on top of the image. That's one way that you can do this, because then somebody can see the text and they can identify if this is what they're after or not quickly, rather than having to scroll down past the image to start reading anything. So on a blog article, we're not going to put it up at the top unless it's kind of small or thin or something. Or you can have your text on the left and your image on the right, something like that's fine. We want our text, our headline, those things to be up top. Now, throughout the site, throughout the article, what we would want to do is have images that help. If you're making custom images, so let's say a graphic that illustrates a point, that is super helpful. If you are putting stock photos in there, that's also good. It's not necessarily bad, but if you put an image that you took into the site, that's actually better. Google will see this stock image and see that it's on 1,000 other sites. And this is a little weird. It doesn't increase your search ranking to have stock photos, but it does, and there's some research that backs this up. It seems to increase your search ranking if you use custom images. So the graphics that you create, images that you take, things like that. Now, it doesn't have to be an image that you took of your office or something. You can just find a contractor who can put these little graphics together, and that would help for sure. So it's better to have some images than none. And if you don't have access to these custom images, it's better to have stock photos than no photos. If you do have access to creating your own images or taking your own photos, it's better to have custom for your website than it is to have stock photos. So it's kind of a hierarchy there with the images. So now that we've got images on your site and they are helpful, they add to the enjoyment of the article, right? And this is part of why even the picture of somebody doing something, while it might not be as helpful as a graphic that illustrates a point, it's better than nothing, because just a page of nonstop text can get visually boring. So I want to break that up a little bit. That's going to increase the engagement, and that's a good place for images as well. Now, images also have something called alt text.
And if we're talking about helpfulness and how we can be helpful for humans and Google, the alt text is specific to Google and humans with visual impairment. So blind folks these days have phones, and they can go to a website, and that their phone will actually read the article to them. And when it encounters an image, it's going to read the alt text. So while this isn't going to apply to most of your viewers, it will apply to some. So instead of seeing the image because they can't see, it will read that alt text, and then they can understand, oh, this is an image of a dog, for example. Now, Google will also take that alt text, and Google wants the internet to be a safe place for everyone and an enjoyable place for everyone. So Google wants to see the alt text is there in the first place to make sure that a blind or visually impaired person can actually engage with your site in a positive way. But then also, Google will read that alt text, and it will help it understand your article. So let's say that this is an article about Avatar. If the alt text of one says Jake Sully talking with Neytiri, and the alt text from another says Neytiri talking with her mother, Google is going to say, oh yeah, this is contributing to that idea of complete content here. If you have an article about dog breeds, let's say best dog breeds, and the alt text on one image says Springer Spaniel, and the alt text on another image says Border Collie, Google says, yes, this is an article about dogs, because Google knows that a Border Collie is a dog and a Springer Spaniel is a dog and all this, because Google is getting smarter. So that's how the alt text really, the majority of that's going to be for Google. We definitely want it there for the folks with visual impairment. The percentage of people on your website with visual impairment might not be outrageously high, but we still want to do it both for them and to contribute to Google's understanding of your website. So the last point on this on-page SEO section of this podcast is to be consistent. Google and humans both really like consistency. If you have a different sized, chapter headings, for example, in a book, and they're structured differently, and they don't, one starts on a brand new page and one starts halfway down a page, that's just confusing. So we don't want that. We want to have consistency within the structure itself. Now, Google's also doing some cool stuff with things like snippets. So when you type in something like best SEO tools, Google might up top display a snippet, so a short section from one of the articles that's already ranking highly, and it might say, top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it might list those off right there. And then a person can get the information they're after without even clicking on the link. Now, the way that Google is pulling information from these snippets is mostly automatically. So there are some things you can do to increase the chances that Google will pull some of your content and use it in this way. The most important thing you can do is to be consistent within your structure. If it sees, let's say that you're comparing the 10 best SEO tools, and it sees a heading 2 that says 1, SEMrush, 2, Ahrefs. The heading 2 would be 1, SEMrush, and then there'd be content, and then heading 2 would be 2, Ahrefs. Google will pull those heading 2s, and it could display those in a snippet as a 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's not displaying the whole article, it's pulling specific sections of the article. Other things that you can do that would contribute to the possibility that Google's going to show you as a snippet would be to create FAQ articles. Now, the same is true here. You would want to have consistent structure within this. So maybe the questions are heading 2, and then the answers are paragraph text. What that empowers Google to do is if somebody searches for that question, it'll find that on your site, and Google might display that in a snippet with the question and then the answer. But again, you have to have this really consistent structure. Now, there's something else, and this is for a little bit more advanced developers, but you can look into schema. So you want to look up schema and then how to enhance your blog article with schema. I'm not going to get into that here because most of our listeners are not the advanced developers. But if you're interested in that, feel free to Google schema, blog articles, and you can find out how you can do that. And that's also going to increase the possibility that Google might pull your some of your information and throw it into that snippet. Now, in order to show up in a snippet, you already have to be ranking on the first page. Google will not pull a snippet from a fourth page result. So you've got to be doing everything else in this podcast first. And then you have the possibility, once you're on the first page, you got the possibility that Google is going to start displaying your information in some interesting ways. And actually, the snippets are above the first result. So that's a cool way that you can actually kind of outpace that competition and get above the first result, is with that consistent structure that Google can then pull from and create a snippet with. Quick recap: Google's purpose is to help searchers find what they're looking for. So that needs to be your main purpose as well. If somebody is searching for something, how can your article or webpage become what it is that they're looking for? That's your main idea when you're approaching SEO and content marketing. Now, to become what people are looking for, you first need to create incredible content, absolutely amazing content that addresses the search term and not just fulfills your own desires for self-expression. We need to address the search term. It has to be freaking incredible content. And the second principle here is you have to write for humans. Now, I know that that's a short one. I didn't go far into detail there, but it is so important that I decided to make it its own principle, simply because if you're not writing for humans, it's not going to end up working long term. Now, third is OnPage SEO. Now, this is structure to help humans understand what it is that your article is about and how it's organized. But that structure, if we do it the right way when creating the blog article, we make sure that the thing that looks like a heading actually has the heading tag, Google understands your article better as well. And that's going to really increase your search ranking. Now, I mentioned link building, so let's briefly go into link building. Link building is how you can get links from other people's website onto yours. I'm not going to go far into detail on this right now, but I might in the future. There's two ways that I really like to get links from other people's websites. And again, we want to get links from websites that Google already trusts. Get them to link to one of your web pages or blog articles. The first way to do that is just by creating incredible content that people want to share. Then, if it's really that good, you're going to find people are linking to you from their site naturally. We've got this, there's a YouTube video and the description below from someone who's got tens or 100,000 views, and they actually linked to one of our StoryBrand tools. We did not reach out to them. We did not ask them for that. They just did that because they really liked our tool. So creating incredible content is the best way to do this. Now, if you create incredible content, you can also reach out to folks. You can email them and say, hey, I thought you might like this article. I thought your readers might like this article, and I noticed that you have an article that's related. Here's a great spot where you might be able to put a link in that sends them to our article. There are templates. I would look up link building email templates online for ways to do this. SEMrush has a tool for how to do this. It's a link building tool. It helps you identify pages that would have a high chance of linking to you, and also people's email addresses who are in authority positions at those companies and might be able to help you get that link. So that's an SEMrush tool. Now, the other way that I really love for getting links is called Help a Reporter Out. You go to Help a Reporter Out, And basically, if a reporter is writing an article and they want a source, so let's say that Forbes is writing an article about men's health, for example, and they're looking at 10 best workouts. They might want to be able to reference experts in the industry and have one type of workout from each expert. So they would put in a request to help a reporter out. And then 3 times a day, Help a Reporter Out sends an email to anyone who is signed up to be a source and says, these are the articles that are being written. If you are an expert in one of these areas, feel free to respond. This is fantastic for getting links because one, you're just going to check the email 2-3 times a day. If you happen to know about one of the requests and you are an expert, typically they're going to want to see somebody with a title that they're going to feel comfortable referencing in their article. You can write up a short response. These don't want to be long. It's a reporter who's already writing an article, so they don't want you to write an article as well. They just want a quote. They want a short snippet that they can put into their article to add to their own authority. And then often, now you cannot require this, and Help a Reporter Out actually has rules about this. You cannot require that the reporter link to your site, but many do. And so you can write your little quote or your snippet. You'll put in your name, your title, your website, and a lot of times, if they use your quote, they will link back to your site. So it's a pretty simple way to get links as long as you actually are an authority in your industry. So those are some ways to get folks to link from their sites to you. Again, this is not a comprehensive link building episode. We might do that in the future. That's just some basic principles for now. So there's your tips on how to get more traffic with SEO and content marketing. Next week, we're going to talk about how to get more traffic with ads. This is a totally different animal. You're buying traffic, you're buying eyeballs rather than waiting for people to find you and doing things that help them find you. So it's a different beast altogether. We're going to have our ads expert on, and we're going to interview him, and we will be able to, hopefully you'll be able to write some ads and create some ads that get you results after hearing that next episode. So tune in next week. See you soon. Thanks for listening to the Clear Brand Academy podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. If you liked this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to outsource your marketing to our team, go to clearbrand.com.